The news media and the Democrats, but I repeat myself, are reeling after the release of Jake Tapper's new book, Oh My God, I Lied About Everything. The book is the result of Tapper's 8-month investigation into Jake Tapper, during which Tapper discovered that almost every word out of Tapper's mouth has been entirely untrue. Tapper says the break in his investigation came after he managed to isolate Tapper in an interrogation room under a bright light, where he continually slapped him, shouting, "Confess, you two-faced bastard," until Tapper broke under the brutal questioning and confessed to Tapper that he'd been deceiving the public for years. In a searching interview on his CNN show, Jake Tapper Investigates, Jake Tapper told Jake Tapper, quote, "I was absolutely shocked at the depth of my duplicity. I lied about Trump's collusion with the Russians. I lied about Trump saying there were good people among the white supremacists. You know that time I said that George Floyd's death indicated widespread racism among police? Total BS. Oh, and how about my panic mongering during the pandemic unleashed by China with funding from Fauci? So help me, a word of truth in my mouth would die of loneliness. Finally, get this. I actually had the gall to publish a book on the cover-up of Joe Biden's dementia in which I pretended to take some responsibility for not covering the story. Not covering the story, I covered the hell out of it. The idea that those lies were any different than all the other lies I told, that was the biggest lie of all." Unquote. As Tapper's book rose on fiction bestseller lists, other journalists and Democrats, but I repeating myself, also began to rake in profits by getting to the bottom of the lies they'd been telling for years. At ABC, for instance, George Stephanopoulos, the host of Good Morning America, opened the show with a special report blowing the lid off the consistent dishonesty of George Stephanopoulos, the host of Good Morning America. It's terrible to think that George Stephanopoulos would have actually gotten away with these lies if I hadn't exposed him, said George Stephanopoulos. I mean, let's go back to the very beginning of my career. All those women who said Bill Clinton was chasing after them with his wing-wang hanging out, the only one lying was me when I said they were lying. Then when ABC hired me after all that lying, I figured they just wanted me to keep on lying, so I did. Like, remember how we spiked Amy Robach's Jeffrey Epstein story during Hillary Clinton's campaign, and I said I had nothing to do with the decision? Well, I did a deep dive into that incident, let me tell you, and it turned out it was me all along, unquote. At CBS, News President Wendy McMahon resigned after 60 Minutes was caught editing an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris so that a learned disquisition on Middle East politics by an AI Kamala voice was dubbed over Harris's original statement, which consisted of a series of random words interrupted by loud cackling laughter. Ms. McMahon said that after finding out how dishonest she was, she could no longer work with herself. Bob Woodward has published a new 4,000-page book called Bull, in which Bob Woodward's lies are exposed by an anonymous source called Deep Bob. Meeting in a shadowy underground garage, Deep Bob tells Woodward the so-called Watergate scandal was just a lot of minor mischief blown out of proportion to punish Nixon for being right about all the communists in the government. In another interview last week, former President John F. Kennedy told Woodward, quote, "Oh, sure, my behavior was much worse than Nixon's, and no one covered that at all. Why do you think I had to leave town in such a hurry? Frankly, I think the entire history of the 20th century needs to be rewritten," unquote. Reacting to these revelations, former President Joe Biden said, quote, "The whole thing's absurd. Now all these journalists are blaming me for Trump's reelection. What did I do? No, seriously, I can't remember. What did I do?" Good morning. I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, we are back laughing our way through the collapse of the news media. Ben After Dark is now a full-length show. What started as a 12-minute monologue is now a members-only spectacle of unscreened guests, unsolicited opinions, and unchecked sarcasm. Check out the trailer now.
Ben After Dark returns. Why, hello. And now it's not just a terrible segment. That's right. We took a perfectly short, manageable late-night bit, and we turned it into a full-length show.
I'm sure it is.
Why? Because no one asked us to, and that felt like the right reason.
Which makes sense.
Now, exclusively for DailyWire Plus members, Ben After Dark delivers more of everything. more uncensored takes.
Oh my God, that's rough.
More cultural chaos, unvetted questions from celebrities who should know better, and more segments that probably should not exist. I know, we have a professional writing staff. Oh, and there's a brand new Ben Destroys, because it's either this or I start throwing things at my TV. There are 330 million people, and that was the best we came up with. It's the all-new, definitively worse, absolutely more Ben After Dark. Friday night only at DailyWirePlus.com, only for members. You're welcome.
Don't miss the all-new Ben After Dark tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, only on Daily Wire Plus. If you are watching the show on Daily Wire Plus or on YouTube or just in your mind, in your imagination, or perhaps on a screen that can only be seen by you and several other people, and you want to leave a comment, and that comment defies all the laws of God and man and just buries you in degradation, bring it on. We'll read it on the show because we love to see you degrade yourself. Today's comment is from Kafifi69. Andrew Klavan is like Gandalf the White, coming over the hill in the two towers, leading the charge with a blinding light of virtue, while the others of his company battle it out on the ground. Great work, Wizard Man. I just wanted to read that one because it's just so true. And unfortunately, now that you know my secret identity, I'll have to kill you. I have to share this with you. All week long. I don't talk to that many people when I'm working this hard, but I've talked to people throughout the week. And I think at least 5 or 6 people said to me, how did you get The Kingdom of Cain onto the New York Times bestseller list? How did you get that up there? And Kingdom of Cain, Finding God in the Literature of Darkness, was on the bestseller list last week. And I keep telling them the same thing. I keep telling them I didn't do it. The people who are listening to my show did it, because they actually are the culture. They are the new culture. And, that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about. There's a lot of big news this week, and we're going to talk about that news, but we're going to talk about it from a very different cultural perspective. Let us get started with today's episode. Oh, and please keep buying, if you haven't got it yet, The Kingdom of Cain, Finding God in the Literature of Darkness. Please go on Amazon and order yourself a copy. The people are really reacting to it in a big way. So please get yourself a copy. Be very helpful. If it keeps selling for a few more weeks, it would be great. Today's episode, even the lies are lies. Last night I went to see this film Sinners, which I noticed is making a lot of money and got fairly good reviews, but no one is talking about it. It's not like Barbie or Oppenheimer where it has this kind of cultural presence. And so I was not surprised to find what it was. It's kind of an uncredited remake of an old 1996 Quentin Tarantino vampire film called From Dusk Till Dawn. They don't give Tarantino credit, but it's almost the same story. It's Ryan Coogler, who made Black Panther, very talented guy, and Michael B. Jordan plays twin brothers, which I didn't even realize it was both him. It was so well done. It's in the 1930s South, and they're trying to start a dance club, and they run into some vampires. And, it's a film so full of talent and beauty, but it's not really good. And that's why people aren't talking. That's why it hasn't, so to speak, bitten into the culture. It's fine. The music's great. Acting's great. Beautifully written. I love the writing. But it has no center. It has no vision. Except isn't it bad that black people were mistreated and white people suck, literally, since it's a vampire film. So talent with no vision is kind of the situation we've been in for a long time. And I always tell you get tomorrow's news today on the Andrew Klavan Show. This week in the left-wing Atlantic, which is supposed to be really cutting edge culturally, staff writer Spencer Kornhaber writes about the death of culture, which you've been hearing on this show for years now. It's really more than a year. He says, according to a recent YouGov poll, Americans rate the 2020s as the worst decade in a century for music, movies, fashion, TV, and sports. A 2023 story in the New York Times Magazine declared that we're in the least innovative, least transformative, least pioneering century for culture since the invention of the printing press. I read that to you on the air, that New York Times story, because it was confirming what I'd already been saying the year before. An art critic for The Guardian recently proclaimed that the avant-garde is dead. But see, that's The Guardian, a very left-wing paper in Britain. But see, that's the thing they're missing. The avant-garde is not dead. I'm absolutely serious about it. You are the avant-garde. But so far, you haven't found a way to claim that role with confidence in the culture, despite the fact that people are going to try to stop you. Not as artists. I'm not saying everybody, obviously, most people aren't artists, but as audiences, what audiences are looking for and what they demand of their artists, which creates the art that is demanded. If I had to describe our position culturally right now, and I'm talking about the people who listen to the show, people who are not insane reactionaries, but are in fact traditionalist conservatives, probably more religious than not, believers in the founding. That's what I think the real drawing line is. Besides God, I think it's that the belief in the founding. But if I had to describe our position culturally right now, we've been to the mountaintop, but we can't seem to get into the promised land. We haven't entered the promised land. And that's why I'm always picking on these anti-Semitic, hateful conspiracy voices, because they seem more powerful than they are. They're not going to be the future, trust me on this. But we have to do it. And, I think about that story in the Bible. In the Bible, Moses and the Hebrews get to the promised land and they send spies in. And the spies come back and they're terrified. They say, there people in this land are giants. We were like bugs, we're like grasshoppers next to them. And one of them, Caleb, says, no, God is on our side. We're well able to win this country. That's what happens. And the people, and our CEO is named Caleb. It may be the same guy, but I guess we're going to find out if it is or not. But anyway, the people panicked and they didn't listen to Caleb. They said, it's just too hard. We want to go back to Egypt and be slaves. At least we had 3 hots and a cot, please. God was so pissed off at their panic that he let them wander in the wilderness 40 years. So I haven't got 40 years. So I want to take a look at the news, but I want to find out where we are, look at the news and find out where we are and where we're going. So I love this sponsor, Boll Branch, because they send me sheets and their sheets are so great. And as you know, I'm awake at night, so I want to be comfortable lying awake, and I am comfortable in these Boll Branch sheets. They quiet all the chaos in your mind after a long day, draping you in a softness so extraordinary, you will genuinely look forward to hitting the sack. Trust me, these signature sheets are no joke. They're made with finest 100% organic cotton, so you can crash every night in the most comfortable feeling imaginable. I'm talking seriously buttery, breathable fabric that keeps you cool and actually gets better over time. Plus, they just keep getting softer with every wash, which is a game changer for your sleep or for me, for my lying awake. Experience the luxury of Boll Branch sheets with their risk-free month-long trial. Wash them, style them, feel the difference for yourself without any catches or commitments. If these sheets don't deliver your best night's sleep or your best night lying awake, return them for a complete refund, no questions asked. It's not going to happen. Feel the difference an extraordinary night's sleep or an extraordinary night lying awake can make with Boll Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/Klavan. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/ how do you spell it? KLAVAN. Save 15%. Exclusions apply. See site for details. Chapter 1, the cover-up is a cover-up. Now, you all know I've been absolutely gleeful about this administration. I mean, we're not playing the Trump happiness montage anymore. Obviously, we've run that joke into the ground. But still, I've been gleeful about the things that Trump is doing. And some people have pointed out and said to me privately and publicly that, some things that I'm being a hypocrite because some things that Trump is doing are bad. And if it had been Biden doing them, I would have attacked them. And look, I've said this before, Trump is the most powerful person on earth. It's okay to criticize him. We're not supposed to, hero worship him. But, there are things I wish he wouldn't do. The Qatari jet, I would have been happier if he hadn't taken that. This crypto thing where if you buy enough Trump coin, you get to visit. That if Biden did that, I would be very upset. You go to a party with Trump and it's not corrupt per se, but it looks like corruption and it could become corruption. I think, don't do those things. But to me, culturally, Trump is the Moses of the moment. The guy is teaching us how we can take our place as the avant-garde. I believe we are, and I'll show you why. So we now are getting all this information about how the Biden government weaponized the COVID screw-up to try and take away our freedoms. According to Michael Schellenberger and Catherine Herridge, they were designating people who went against COVID mandates as extremists, which meant they were open to investigation by the FBI. There's a report from the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations telling us they lied about the danger of vaccines and how much danger there was, especially the young man of heart inflammation. They lied to control us and they used fear. So let's just go back for a moment. Remember when Trump got COVID and he came back after 2 days and he stood on the balcony of the White House and he boldly took off his mask, and this is what he said. This is cut 1.
Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen. We have the greatest country in the world. We're going back to work. We're going to be out front. As your leader, I had to do that. I knew there's danger to it, but I had to do it. I stood out front. I led. Nobody that's a leader would not do what I did. And I know there's a risk, there's a danger, but that's okay.
So there's a danger, but that's okay. And I led. I said, don't be afraid of it. Don't let it dominate your life. And here, and if I've played this once, I've played it 100 times, it should go down in the halls of infamy. Here's Jake Tapper speaking as a representative of the media. I mean, he represented what all the media, how all the media responded to when Trump did that. This is what he said, cut to.
It's okay to be afraid of COVID, and it's okay that it's dominating your life because it has dominated your life.
Can you imagine, like, FDR getting, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. What do you mean, fear itself? They're Nazis, all in depression and everything stuff. Really, shame. Endless shame. One of the most shameful moments, I think, to ever happen on a TV screen. This is why I don't criticize Trump. I see things he's doing. I wish he didn't, but still, this is important. You know how I've talked about shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and said, well, if you outlaw masculinity, then only outlaws will be men. Well, Donald Trump is sometimes a little bit of an outlaw, but we know that he is, in fact, the guy that he says he is by the fact that he was shot in the head and he stood up and raised his fist and said, fight. Those are good credentials to me. So now, all right, so that's where we stand culturally, but those are our cultural choices, right? Be afraid, they don't let it dominate, and fight. Those are our cultural choices. And Jake Tapper now has a new book out called Original Sin that I was making fun of in the opening. He wrote it with Alex Thompson from Axios. It's supposed to make us think, he and the news media are really reconsidering their ways in the light of the fact that Joe Biden turned out to have a terrible dementia and probably wasn't even running the country. And here is Tapper, being contrite. I think this is on the Megyn Kelly show, cut 3.
Alex and I are here to say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct, and that there should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with, all of us, for how this was covered or not covered sufficiently. 100%. I'm not here to defend coverage that I've already acknowledged I wish I could do differently.
So this is like the scene in E.T. where the kid has to detach from E.T. He's trying to detach from the Democrat Party and say the Democrat Party fooled us, they're wonderful media, and now we're reconsidering. Meanwhile, the fact you can tell that there are different camps here. Joe Biden timed an announcement, his family timed an announcement that he's got aggressive metastatic prostate cancer. And look, my heart goes out to him and his family, and also I just want to mention to Scott Adams, who was on the show when he just sort of coming out politically, and he's got it too, and says he only has months to live, which is genuinely a sad thing. By my standards, a young guy, and he is a really important voice. So look, everybody faces death, and that's nothing. But of course, the Democrats are saying, well, we should pay respect by not talking about his dementia, and you can take that for what it's worth, which is nothing. So here's the thing. Tapper says, we didn't cover this up. The Democrats covered it up. And he goes on Megyn Kelly, and Megyn Kelly just, you do not want to lie to Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly is smart and a lawyer, and she will rip you apart, and she just brutalized him. Here she is with her response to Tapper, cut 4.
There was an attempted cover-up. It could only ever work if you allowed it, if the press allowed it. Some of us tried not to, and some of us were complicit.
First of all, the Biden White House did not like me. Okay, I do not have great connections with the Biden White House.
Well, clearly you have a lot of sources. You say you talked to over 200 sources for this book. So you have some election, you could have called and worked.
No, that's the point, is that they were not being honest. That's
how did the Wall Street Journal get it in June of 2024? And Jake Tapper and CNN couldn't find sources for this story then before he dropped out?
A friend of mine said it was like watching a puppy get hit with a rolled up newspaper. it really, why? He's got no case. Look, I've said this before, but it's really worth repeating. This is a big story, and it's a big scandal, and it's a big cover-up. But the only reason they're talking about it is because they got caught. Because in that debate, he fell apart so badly with Trump that they couldn't deny that they had, and we had the video, we had the tapes, and we had been saying it, as Tapper admits, we had been saying it from the start. A lot of people had been saying it even the first time he ran, even when he ran for president, even during the primaries, they were saying it. What they're not talking about is they are talking about this because they can't deny it, because it's irrefutable. And they're using the cover-up to cover up the fact that everything they said was untrue. Everything they said was a lie. Everything they said was in service to power. They talk about talking truth to power. They were talking power to truth. They lied about COVID. I mean, I was saying this in the opening, but let's just go through some of them, right? They lied about COVID, where it come from. If you said it was from China, you were racist. You were racist if it came from there was a lab, the Wuhan lab where they were looking at this disease. It came from that. They lied about Fauci, and they were lighting candles to Fauci, who was complicit in paying for the kind of research they were doing. They lied about George Floyd when they made it sound like the police are inherently racist and should be defunded, which is nuts. When the riots happened, they lied and said they were mostly peaceful. They lied about whether Trump said there were people on both sides of the white supremacists versus the socialists. He didn't. He was talking about a statue argument, a local argument about statues. He said so in the same speech, like about 3 sentences later. They lied when he said the auto industry was going to see a bloodbath. They said he was calling for blood. Russian collusion, 3 years, and they gave themselves Pulitzer Prizes for their lies. The absurd way they covered that E. Jean Carroll lawsuit where they took away the statute of limitations just to let her bring a suit where she didn't even know what year the event occurred in, so how could he possibly defend himself? The absurd New York conviction for felony or felonies unknown, where the judge couldn't even tell the jury what they were voting on, but it didn't matter. They convicted him anyway. Every time they used the term gender-affirming care to describe the Joseph Mengele Nazi butchery of children, that's a lie. Systemic racism in America. Joe Biden came out and said that. They supported him in it. The fact that when you go and watch a Hollywood movie, every marriage is a mixed marriage racially. Obviously nothing against mixed marriages, but I'm just being lectured to by the worst people in the country. The people in Hollywood are lecturing me about I worked in Hollywood. If you see a black guy there, he's like wandering around lonely in the halls. That's like, it is a completely racist, industry. A baby is a fetus if you want to abort him, but a fetus is a baby if you happen to be a migrant being deported. Love is love. There's no difference between homosexuality and heterosexuality. DEI isn't racism. The awards they gave to Ibram Kendi and to Ta-Nehisi Coates, those are lies, because those guys do second and third rate work, and they gave it to them because they were black and saying America was bad. The fact that they said the right is violent, it's the left. Again and again, trans people are violent. The trans movement is violent. I shouldn't say trans people are violent. The trans movement is violent. Hamas is the violent one. If the media were reformed, if they had changed their ways, the biggest question of all, which they're not covering at all, by the way, if you read the New York Times, if you look at network news, nobody is covering it, is this one that Trump brings up. Who was running the country? This is cut 5.
When Joe Biden was with it, he would never have approved it. You take a look, he would have never approved open borders. Who signed legislation opening our border? I don't think he knew. I said there's nobody that can want an open border, nobody. And now I find out that it wasn't him. He auto-penned it. Who was operating the auto-pen?
Why is that not the front page story on the New York Times every single day, or on the Wall Street Journal? Who ran the country for 4 years? Who let 20 million migrants come into the country? Who classified parents who didn't want in their schools as possible terrorists? Who did this stuff? Who was giving orders to Merrick Garland in the Department of Justice? Who was telling him what to do? Joe Biden was he has been a corruptocrat his entire life, but he was not a radical, So who was doing all this stuff? Now, James Comer, who's at House Oversight, he says he's going to come after the guys who've done this. Some names have been bruited around, but we'll find out more. He says he's going to look into this. Everything they said was a lie. To isolate the Joe Biden thing, as opposed to using it as the model for how they were reporting the news, is just to tell another lie. And so this is the situation that we're in, right? We're so furious. We have been so abused. We have been called terrorists. We've been called racist. We've been called, sexist. We've been told that our God stinks. We've been told that our country stinks. We've been told that the founding was wrong. And if you go to the founders' houses, all you want to hear about are the slaves and not the geniuses who forged a new world out of the old one, who took the old world and made it the world we're living in today with all the beauty and triumph of this country. we're so angry about that we go over to the guys on the other side who are telling their own lies, like Putin's a nice guy, or Jews are evil, or bigotry is fine. All that, you know who I'm talking about. You know the people who are rattling that stuff off, and they get millions of views because that's, it's like the line in Isaiah, preach to us prophecy and illusion. Please tell us nice things, prophecy and illusion. That's what how Isaiah condemns Israel, saying they don't want to hear the truth, they want to hear illusions. And these are illusions that make angry people feel better. But the truth is that these people lied to us to make us afraid. They wanted us afraid all the time, afraid of being called names, afraid of getting sick, afraid of, just walking outdoors. They wanted our freedom. They want to run the world, so they wanted to take our freedom. And what I want is for us to fearlessly tell the truth so we can make them afraid and get our freedom back. Now, I've probably never told you this before, but I never get any sleep. That's why I love my Helix Sleep mattress. I love my Helix Sleep mattress. I mean, you'll love it because it'll help you fall asleep, but that's out of the question for me. I love it because when I lie awake, it just feels great. One thing I love is that the Helix mattress regulates temperature, which is a big deal for me. It eases some of those annoying middle of the night wake-ups. And as temperatures continue to warm up, especially where I am, and you head into summer, that can be a really important deal. It's easy to connect to other wearable devices so you can actually see the data to back up your sleep improvements each night. No more questions. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress, they actually match you with the perfect mattress for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or in my case, a lie awaker, they've got you covered. All you have to do is take their sleep quiz and find your ideal match. And trust me, when you find the right match, you will wonder how you ever slept or lay awake on anything else. Right now is actually the perfect time to upgrade your sleep because Helix is offering a fantastic Memorial Day sale. Go to helixsleep.com/Klavan. You'll get 27% off site-wide, plus a free bedding bundle, which includes a sheet set, mattress protector with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. That's helixsleep.com/Klavan for 27% off site-wide, plus a free bedding bundle with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. helixsleep.com/sing-it. Klavan. No ease in Klavan. I just make it look easy. Chapter 2, Trickle-Down Trump. So Donald Trump, again, because people have complained that I don't criticize him, he may not always tell the truth. I mean, he exaggerates a lot, but he may not always tell the truth. But he shows us how the truth is told. You've got to find your own truth. You can't turn to politicians for the truth. Put not your faith in princes. You can't turn to politicians for the truth. You got to find your own truth. You got to read. You got to study. You got to go to mentors. You got to listen to the people who have seen things, who have faith, who understand what faith means. But Donald Trump shows us how the truth is told. I've often wondered, and I've just wondered aloud on the show sometimes, why is it that he drives people crazy on both the left and the right? People who love him, people who hate him, they go nuts over him. They lose their reason about Donald Trump. And I've always really wondered about this. But I think I was watching him this week, and it suddenly occurred to me is that, what the left tried to do is they tried to take our good manners and the rules that we have about good manners. Don't say that. Don't say this. But that's rude to say. And they tried to use those manners to tie us up and gag us. Right? So you say that, it's racist. You go, well, no, that's just the truth. And if you don't get at the truth, you can't help people. No, it's racist. So, you don't want to be racist, do you? Well, no, I don't want to be racist. And that's what they use to tie us up. And we on the right would break those rules. We would say, no, I'm going to say these things. If we had courage, we'd come out and say them, and sometimes, I saw even on the right, I saw people get scared and say, no, we can't say that, or we have to say it this way, or all this stuff. But some of us just said what we had to say. We broke the rules. But Trump doesn't break the rules. He makes the rules. He doesn't even pay attention to their rules. He just makes his own rules. Now, sometimes I wish he would do it differently. We're different people. We come from different places. That's fine. But that is how you become the avant-garde. You make the rules. The avant-garde doesn't react. It doesn't say, oh, you like Israel, therefore I'm going to hate all the Jews. It doesn't do that. And aren't I brave? Because I'm just asking questions, but I'm going to say, it actually goes into its own heart and into literature and the wisdom literature and the history and the traditions, and it finds what it is and who it is, and it starts to make their own rules. That is what, you don't say, oh, you're for DEI, so therefore I hate black people. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's what reactionary means. But the avant-garde creates. They create a world that is the world that they believe the world is truth. They say, this is who I am. If you don't like it, go somewhere else, right? And that's why they hate Trump. That's what he does. I was watching him this week, specifically, and I only use this as an example, though it did make me laugh very hard. Their rule is you have to cower in fear that you'll be called racist or sexist or whatever. And the decent people, us, are more prone to that, right? Because as Bill Whittle used to say, only a person who's not racist feels bad about being called racist. The racists don't care. So it's a really good way to silence the good people on the right and give the right over to the bad people so that then the right can be vilified, right? It's a really clever thing. But Trump is, I'm just going to call it, like I said, I'm just going to tell the truth. And he doesn't even have to always be right. It's simply the fact that he says the truth, and he says it without fear or favor. He's not, I think he's the least bigoted president we have ever had, actually, the least racist president he ever had. He knows there are differences between races, but he doesn't seem to hate anybody. So he's got the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, at the White House, another one of these Oval Office explosions, right? And somebody asks a question, there's a question to Trump, what would convince you that there's no white genocide in South Africa? And this is a place where in Parliament, people are standing up and calling for the murder of whites. People are calling for the murder of whites all the time, and the government does nothing about it. They kind of turn a blind eye to it, and many whites have been murdered. And so Trump lets about 60 white guys from South Africa into the country as refugees from black oppression, from genocidal oppression. And the left goes insane when you're letting white people into the country. That's not the plan. It's just embarrassing because he doesn't care. Trump doesn't care. He sees people being oppressed. He lets them in, right? And that made perfect sense. So Ramaphosa starts answering the question that Trump has asked. What would convince you? And Ramaphosa says, I'll tell you what would convince you. And Trump says, no, wait a minute. This is what he says, cut 7.
We have thousands of stories talking about it. Sure. And we have documentaries, we have news stories. And that, is Natalie here, somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things. And it has to be responded to.
So he then unrolls this film showing all these incidences of anti-white bigotry in South Africa. And remember, South Africa went through apartheid. It was a very, very evil, bigoted, system on the one side, and it's just two wrongs don't make a right. That's it. You have to stop. It has to stop somewhere. There's no reparations that are going to solve anything. You just have to stop. You just have to make it stop. So he forces him to watch this film. And one of the things in this film, there's a demonstration where there are crosses along the road, like 1,000 crosses to mark the deaths of white people. And he calls them graves. He says, each one of those marks the grave. The press says, oh, Trump, the falsehoods that come from Trump, those are not graves. Those are just crosses that were erected. But each cross actually represented a death, a murder. And so White House smoke show Caroline Leavitt is questioned by NBC. And here's that exchange, cut 13.
It's not true that the video was showing a burial site. It is unsubstantiated that that's the case.
No, it is true that video showed the crosses that represent...
Which is what the president claimed.
The video showed images of crosses in South Africa about white farmers who have been killed and politically persecuted because of the color of their skin. And those crosses are representing their lives. Those crosses are representing their lives in the fact that they are now dead and their government did nothing about it.
So, right? So it's not the literal graves, but it's the symbolic graves. And they always do this with Trump. He speaks inexactly and they call it a lie. And they always interpret it in the worst possible way. So they haven't reformed at all. They're just going to keep on lying. They're going to keep on doing what they do unless we replace them. Really, this is what. And by the way, the president, Ramaphosa, he said, well, it's not government policy. But if somebody stood up in Congress, in our Congress, and called for the murder of reporters at the New York Times and Trump and nobody else said anything about it, and those people weren't censured and even thrown out of their positions, then the New York Times would call it genocide. It would be it would be in fact murder and terrible, and that's what's happening in South Africa. So Trump just says it. He just says it. He says, this is true. I'm going to confront this guy with it. I'm going to confront him in the Oval Office. And I've heard people say, oh, well, that's impolite. And you know what? At this point, I don't think those rules are in play. But the wonderful thing is, this is the important thing. this has trickled down throughout the administration. They've all begun to sound like Trump. These former rhinos, these former guys who were playing to the Washington press corps, these former guys who were afraid, and they were, all of them, afraid of the New York Times and WAPO and NBC and ABC. They're so scared of them that they wouldn't say what the people were waiting to hear. All the people wanted was to hear them speak the truth. They didn't have to be brash like Trump. They didn't have to be rude like Trump. They just had to speak the truth, and they wouldn't do it. And suddenly they have. So, for instance, this big, beautiful bill has passed through the House. Now, this is just the start. Now the Senate is going to pass a version, and then they have a reconciliation where they try and get it out. So I'm not going to parse it yet. Obviously, a bill this big is going to have things we hate in it, and things that it has some things that are actually good. But the fact that Mike Johnson got this thing through as far as he does, as he has, is amazing. And when he made the announcement, he sounded just like Donald Trump. Here's Mike Johnson making the announcement that the big, beautiful bill is passed. Cut 6.
We're going to win so much. We're going to win at every level. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy. We're going to win with military. We're going to win with healthcare and for our veterans. We're going to win with every single facet.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. Yay! You'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay.
We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
It's uncanny, right? Mike Johnson sounds just like Donald Trump. Marco Rubio, the guy who has now grown into his ears. He is now a man as big as his ears. He is doing a great, great job as Secretary of State. They bring him before the Senate on budget cuts. They question him on budget cuts and deportations and all this. And Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, I believe the Native Americans call him man who drinks with gangsters. I think that's his name because he's the guy who went down to El Salvador for a margarita with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And he's attacking Rubio for cutting U.S. aid. And Rubio just finally goes off on him and starts to list all the things that he cut, all the ridiculous things that he cut and defend his deportations. And he sounded like Trump. This is cut 8.
We spent $227,000 for Big Cat's YouTube channel from USAID. We spent $14 million for social cohesion in Mali, whatever the hell that means. So I can go on and on. I got the list here, and there's more. I didn't even bring the whole list. In the case of El Salvador, absolutely. Absolutely. We deported gang members, including the one you had a margarita with. And that guy is a human trafficker, and that guy is a gangbanger, and the evidence is going to be clear. In the days to come, you're going to see who you went to defend.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary Rubio has the floor.
Mr. Chairman, he can't make unsubstantiated comments like that.
What was unsubstantiated about it? This is their new word, unsubstantiated. And I love when outlets like the New York Times call something unsubstantiated. They have the most reporting power in the country. The New York Times has more reporting power than any other venue in the country. If it's unsubstantiated, pick up the damn phone and substantiate it. That's your job. You can't substantiate that white people are being killed in South Africa? Really? You can't substantiate whether this guy has got a record, Ortega has got a record that connects him to MS-13? Really? It's unsubstantiated? It's unsubstantiated because you're sitting on the phone. You are sitting on top of the phone instead of picking it up and putting it against your ear and saying, hello, would you substantiate this? This is their job, to substantiate things. They are so dishonest. It is like it is like a fog you have to look through to get to it. And this idea like, oh, yeah, well, maybe we missed the dementia story. The New York Times, by the way, isn't even covering the dementia story. The Wall Street Journal buried Biden's ultimately fatal cancer. They buried it on like page 4, when it was obviously brought out to sort of detract from the dementia story, which they also are not particularly covering. But really, that is the story. This is the big story because the media is complicit. It doesn't bother me that the Democrats lie because politicians lie. We have an institution for ferreting out those lies. It's called the media, the news media. They are the ones who are lying, and that's a problem. When who will guard the guardians? When the guardians of truth are lying, who will get the truth. And basically, it's us. It's you and me. It really is. And so, just giving more examples of how this Trump system trickles down. RFK Jr., who brought out a report yesterday that I thought was actually pretty good, detailing the chronic diseases among children and how they've gone up, and putting forward some ideas of what may be causing them. He says this is the diagnosis, it's not the cure. But it was a very, like I said, he's the guy that I've doubted most in his appointment, because sometimes he strikes me as a little loopy, but so far he's really keeping it in bounds and doing a good job. And I thought this was a good report. And he was questioned by Senator Patty Murray from Washington on cuts at Health and Human Services. And here was his response. This is cut 9.
I want to point out something, Senator. You presided here, I think, for 32 years. You presided over the destruction of the health of the American people.
Well,
Our people are now the sickest people in the world.
Seriously.
Because you have
Mr.
not done your job.
Seriously. That is an
What have you
amazing
done about it? What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
Mr. Secretary,
what have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease?
So Trumpism, it's catching, it's catching, and it tells us how to be as well. I really do believe this. Listen, I think we should be more polite than Trump. I think we should be less carnival barker than Trump. I think we should be, because that's my style. I would rather be polite and actually say the truth fearlessly. Just stand where I'm going to stand and just not move. If you have the courage to know that you're not going to move, you're not going to be moved off the truth. You can be as polite as you have to be. You really can. I mean, you don't have to shout at people, But listen, I will not take anything away from Trump's courage and his brashness and the boldness that has made him who he is and has seized the attention away from our corrupt press. And this is what I want to see. This is what I want to see in our culture. And I've been talking to people in Hollywood. I've been talking to a lot of people in the culture, and it's what I'm not seeing yet. It's what I'm not seeing yet on the right. I keep hearing people saying, well, we don't want to make political things. We don't want to. Well, okay, but I'm going to talk about that at the end of the show. There is a way to do this and to talk about this, not just artists, but the audience as well, what the kinds of things we demand. Remember, the way is now clear. God has brought us to the edge of the promised land. The media and the academies and the deep state, they only look like giants. We are well able to take this country back. Have you checked your home title lately? Neither have I. Most homeowners never do. But with the growing amount of digital scams targeting property owners, it's more important than ever. With modern technology, criminals have found an alarming way to steal your home equity. They simply forge your signature on a document, add a fake notary stamp, pay a small county fee, and just like that, your home title gets transferred without your knowledge. Once they control your title, they can take out loans against your equity. They can even sell your property entirely. And the worst part is you might not even discover anything's wrong until you receive an unexpected collection notice or foreclosure letter. Don't wait until it's too late. Take a moment right now to verify your home title status and protect what's likely your biggest investment. Use promo code Klavan at HometitleLock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You'll also get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HometitleLock.com. Now use promo code Klavan. That's HometitleLock.com. Promo code, how do you spell it?
K-L-A-V-A-N, there are no E's in Klavan.
Chapter 3, just asking questions. I have to address this horrible murder in D.C. the other day because it also feeds into what I want to say when I sum up these ideas and this news. I'm sure you've all heard this, 2 Israeli embassy staffers were shot to death outside an event at the Capitol's Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. And of course, as it seems like a message from God in these incidents that they're just the loveliest people. 2 young people, he had bought the ring that he was about to ask her to marry him. His name was Yaron Lashinsky. Hers was Sarah Milgram, and all the people who knew them said that they were these wonderful, beautiful people. He was a Christian, but I think she was a Jew. They were both Israelis. And as Lashinsky said, Israel is the only place in the Middle East where Christians can thrive, and that's absolutely true. And so they were at this multi-faith meeting at the museum which was discussing how to get humanitarian aid into Gaza while the Israelis are clearing out Hamas, because that war can't end until all the hostages are released, which is, if Joe Biden had been alive when he was alive, he could have, that was the thing he should have said. Of course, I'm not saying a word about this until you release all those hostages. I'm not going to hold Israel back. I'm not going to condemn them. Anybody who does condemn them, I'm just telling them now those hostages have to be released. And that's not happening, and it can't end, and it shouldn't end until it does. So the suspect shouted, "Free, free Palestine," as he was taken into custody, and the New York Times is still trying to figure out what his motive was. He said, "I did this for Gaza," and the New York Times, I'm not actually making this up, New York Times said, "We're still searching for his motive. I did this for Gaza," he said. So now, you know how I feel about anti-Semitism. I think it's the hatred of God. People, I brought the receipts. I wrote an article about it on my Substack. I've talked to you about it here, that the philosophers leading into the 20th century were talking about, why is this foreign God? Why did Jesus bring this foreign God into the Jews? And it's all the Jews' fault, especially in Germany, this was going on. And basically the God of the Jews became the God of the West through Jesus Christ, the Jewish Savior, Jesus Christ. And when people attack Jews for not accepting Jesus Christ, they're attacking Jews for not accepting their own Savior. They don't believe that he was the Savior. And I think they'll find out differently, but I think that they will find out in love, because I think God does not let his people, will not release his people or turn his back on his people. And so I look at the people, and you guys know who they all are at this point. We're just asking questions about Israel. It's not wrong to question. It's not anti-Semitic to question Israel. It's not anti-Semitic to question Israel. It's not, I don't know where your expertise on Israel comes from, but let's say you have opinions on Israel, that of course is fine, but it is wrong to suggest things that would cause Israel to cease to exist. That's anti-Semitic. And you know what? I think all these people are anti-Semitic. I don't think in principle it's anti-Semitic to question the actions of Israel, but I think the people doing it are anti-Semitic, and the people supporting Hamas are nuts. They are violent, anti-Semitic, stupid people. So this is the thing. These shooters are almost always mentally ill. And if we want to address these shootings that we have in this country, we should address the way we treat mental illness and whether or not we can do a better job about that. But it always raises the question, do they represent the non-mentally ill people on whose behalf they are acting? So in other words, if the Bernie bro shoots up Republicans in Congress, is Bernie Sanders actually, is the logic of Bernie Sanders violent? I know Sanders is not violent, but is the logic of Bernie Sanders ultimately leading to violence? And what the press always does is, if the shooter is in some way connected to conservatism, if they can make that connection, that's what they blame it on. If he's not, they blame it on guns. And so they never lose. They never lose. It's a tails, heads I win, tails you lose situation. In this case, though, and a lot of the anti-Semites were online saying, well, that's a bad guy who shot these people, but that doesn't mean that Gaza is, that what the Jews are doing in Gaza is right. In this case, I think these people are supporting this killer. I think the killer is probably mentally ill. I don't think he actually knows what the hell he's doing. That's my guess. But I think these people, when you shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, yes, that's a violent thing to say. If you're talking about the deaths of 1,200 people in the most violent possible way, in the most disgusting possible way, people bragging about the and the murders, people bragging about the children they killed in front of their parents and the parents they killed in front of children. And if you go out and like Susan Sarandon and you say, well, that didn't happen. Or if you're tearing down the pictures, if it didn't happen, how come you're tearing down the pictures? How come you can't look those victims in the face? If you don't think about the hostages every day before you start thinking about what's happening in Gaza, there is something wrong with you. And yes, you are supporting this people. Now, the Jew haters, the thing is, there's certain causes that are violent. I think the trans movement is violent. I don't think transgender people are necessarily violent, obviously. But I think that the trans movement is engaged in every left-wing violent movement. They're deeply engaged in almost every left-wing violent movement. Why? Because they're fighting reality. Why they're fighting reality? Why does anti-Semitism so often lead to violence? Why do these people who say America first, but they hate Jews, suddenly get very friendly with Iran that hates America? They hate Jews and they hate America. How is that? You're just trying to get us to go to war with Iran. Well, I don't want us to go to war with Iran, but I don't want Iran to go to war with us first either. And so I want to keep my eye on Iran. I think because the Jew haters hate God and God is the author of reality. I think that anti-Semitism is inherently violent. I think that there's a polite anti-Semitism, like British people, I don't want a Jew in my club, that sort of thing. But I think the real anti-Semitism we're seeing now is inherently violent. And I think, yes, every single reporter who talks about Hamas as if they were a legitimate organization, as if they were doing something legitimate on October 7th, instead of being a cat's paw of Iran who wants to destroy us all, is complicit in this killing, which brings me to my final chapter. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, it can feel incredibly overwhelming. She wants to make the right choice, but she may feel pressure from society or those around her suggesting her unborn child isn't yet a life. That's where PreBorn steps in. Their mission is simply to love these women and help them see that choosing life is possible, creating what can truly be an eternal moment. Take Stephanie's story. She was scared. She didn't feel worthy of support, but after receiving compassion and care at one of PreBorn's partner clinics, everything changed, especially after she saw her baby on ultrasound. That moment transformed her outlook completely. Today, she will tell you her 5-year-old son is her greatest blessing. By supporting PreBorn, you're helping fund free ultrasounds at pro-life clinics across the country, empowering more mothers to choose life. A monthly donation of $28 can make an eternal difference. If you want to get involved, it's easy. Just dial pound 250 and say baby, or visit preborn.com/Klavan. Your gift is tax deductible and genuinely life-changing. Again, that's preborn.com/KLAVAN to donate today. Final chapter, sinners. So this is just my observation. This is not scientific, it's experiential. Racism is like a pair of glasses that make you stupid. They say rose-colored glasses. Racism is like stupid colored glasses. And the reason you can tell this is when you put on racism glasses, everything becomes clear because they block out all the complexity of life and they just look at one thing. People who are poor have the same problems that, white people who are poor have the same problems that black people have, the things that keep them poor. And blacks have been kept poor more than whites, I think, in America because the Democrats keep them that way. So they'll be dependent on them. They enshrine their poverty behaviors as black, like drug use and fatherless children and poor work habits and anti-school prejudice, anti-education prejudice. Those aren't black. Those are just the way poor people think, So they basically, the Democrats say these are black things. You're racist if you don't if you think people should work hard and go to school. You're racist, and you think dude, all poor people don't work hard enough and go to school. That's how they stay poor. With Jews, if you put on the stupid glasses, you forget the fact that there are certain things about Jewish culture that put them in certain positions. So they have a very strong intellectual culture with high IQs when they take IQs. And I'm not at all a worshiper of IQs, but they do measure something. And so people who are racists and they're wearing the stupid glasses, they say, well, Jews are at the forefront of communism, at the forefront of every bad intellectual movement. And there's a lot of truth to that because they are intellectuals, but they're also at the forefront of every good intellectual movement, science and medicine. They're 0.2% of the world's population. They've won 1/4 of the Nobel Prizes in physics, chemistry, and medicine. So thank you, Jews. But if we take the race glasses off and look at intellectuals, just look at intellectuals as a class, and I think Thomas Sowell has done wonderful, wonderful work on this, and I can't match that here at all and couldn't match it anyway because Thomas Sowell is Thomas Sowell. But then it's another story because intellectuals, like poor people, have some very bad habits. There's a misguided but interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal called "The Alienated Knowledge Class Could Turn Violent. Societies that exile their intellectuals risk turning them into revolutionaries." This is by Jukka Savolainen, a professor of sociology at Wayne State University. And he points out that a lot of the violent movements, the left-wing movements especially, but also some on the right, are supported by intellectuals who are out of work or otherwise feel irrelevant. And the misguided part is he then blames evil Trump. He says, you're firing all these intellectuals from government and they'll go off and become violent. But obviously that's not the problem. The problem is not that intellectuals are out of work. The problem is that they are, in some sense, they make themselves irrelevant, right? These are people. Michael Barone has a column this morning, I think. He says the Democrat Party has become increasingly dominated by white college-educated people. As the financial advisor Dave Ramsey put it, the hardest people to convince to use common sense are the smart people. High education voters repelled by Trump's crudeness provided the enthusiasm behind the Russian collusion hoax and the various lawfare prosecutions and attempts to remove Trump from office somehow. They provided the impetus behind the flawed science to extend school closings and other undue COVID-19 restrictions. After George Floyd's death in May 2020, they gave support or silent acquiescence to radical calls for defunding the police, to reparations for descendants of slaves, and to continued racial quotas and preferences, all positions opposed by large majorities of voters because they're stupid. And I have seen this a million times. Look, I know a lot of smart people, and a lot of them are stupid, or they're stupid in certain ways. Now, I'm not the first person to notice this by any means, but it used to be that the smart guys, the intellectuals, were monks and priests, right? In the medieval times, that's what you became. You became a monk or a priest. And so you had a guiding philosophy that made you smart. So you were not just an intellectual, you were Thomas Aquinas, and you were thinking about important things and real things like what God wants us to do in the world. Now, intellectuals have no guiding culture except themselves, and so they feed on their own information. They go into academies and they say, this America is a terrible place. And you think, as opposed to what? What are you talking about? Some castle you have built in your mind that you think it's important because it's your mind. I remember Harris, the atheist, saying, aren't the Eastern religions so much more intellectual? And I thought, well, that may flatter you, but that has nothing to do with whether they are true or not. So I started out talking about sinners and saying there's a lot of talent in sinners, but it has no heart, it has no center, it has no way of looking at things. And if the avant-garde is dead, that's why I say that you're the avant-garde. That's why I say that because you actually do know something that these people don't know. But I think a lot of conservatives, I'm not making any accusations, but a lot of conservatives don't have the confidence because they don't have the backing of the society. And so they don't become the avant-garde who basically doesn't break the rules, but they make the rules. That's what conservatives have to start doing. We know the things that are right. And this is all about assumptions. And I've been talking about this since I started talking about this. I've been talking about this for over 20 years. When you look at the arts and we say, oh, we don't want to make propaganda, we don't want to make this or that, I always tell people it's not what you say in the arts, it's the underlying assumptions of the arts. And that's what drives people crazy about Trump. His underlying assumptions are actually very commonsensical, and he doesn't stop to pay homage to the craziness of intellectuals. He just takes that common sense forward, and that's why people support him, and that's why people hate him. And we have not yet shown the courage to do that, to make our assumptions known, which is kind of why I'm writing books like The Kingdom of Cain and The Truth and Beauty. I'm trying to show that the arts, this is what the arts are about. The arts are about our relationship with God because they're a work of the Spirit. So I could now talk about what their assumptions are. And then that would just be telling us what to oppose. And then we become reactionary. That's what they all do. Well, the left says this and the left says that. And I've been doing that a lot. I did that a lot when I started out, showing what the assumptions are in movies and in novels that are polluting them and are making them corrupt, even when we think, oh, there's somebody who said something we agree with, or there's a story that really has a kind of conservative tweak to it. Why is it those things continue to eat away at the founding and at our religion and at the things that make us wise and good, even though we might happen to be an intellectual and have that handicap? If we have it based in faith, if we have it based in good traditions, then that intellectualism can actually be helpful into the world. So let me just give you a couple of assumptions that I think have to go into not just our arts, but into our audiences, not just into our creative world, but also into the audiences who show up and make that creative world possible, and also in the things that we say and that we're not afraid to say and that we are courageous enough to say. Because remember, the left, the reason that a lot of right-wing media people don't understand what censorship is or what cancel culture is because they really can't get canceled because they have the First Amendment behind them. But you don't have the First Amendment behind them if HR comes in and says you're not going to get promoted if you don't shut up, or you're not going to be, make it through your next contract if you don't stop saying the things that you're saying, and you have to now go to class and learn to say what we want you to say. So here are some assumptions that I would like to see enter into arts, and this is basically why I wrote The Kingdom of Cain, why I wrote The Truth and Beauty, why I'm talking about the arts in terms of what they say about God. The first one is there's a God. And somehow that God is tied up both in the uniqueness that makes us individuals and the love that makes us all one, right? We are each his own, and yet we are all together. And that is only possible under the aegis of a personal God, okay? That personal God is a God of love. And what we mean by that is love is a very specific thing. It is the ability of one individual to take another individual's good and make it his good, to make another individual's bad and make it his bad. That is the way I hope you feel about your spouse, right? That her good is your good and her bad is your bad. When she is unhappy, you're unhappy. When she's happy, you're happy. And that, it doesn't mean you do everything. It just means you understand, you feel what she is feeling. That only happens under the aegis of a personal God. We should see personal God. A great example of this is in the movie A Quiet Place, where this couple that cannot speak or the monsters will get them, sits down to dinner and says a silent grace. And the minute they say that, we are on their side and we care what happens to them, and it makes them beautiful. And it was a brilliant, brilliant scene. All right, 2, and this is the big one. This is the one that nobody can grasp because feminism has them by the throat. Femininity is an act of good. Only women have it. Only women can be feminine. Men can be effeminate, but they can't be feminine. Only women can be feminine. Women, in being feminine, represent a different value system than men, a value system that is antithetical to the materialist system that men have to attend to in order to keep women safe so they can be feminine, because femininity is an essential good. Without femininity, the world dies, not just because you don't have children, but because there's nothing left but essentially the values of men, which will destroy the world. Femininity, and the most essential and the most common expression of femininity and that feminine value system is motherhood and homemaking, because it translates material goods into spiritual goods. That's what femininity does. It takes cells and it turns them into people. It takes babies and turns them into human beings. It takes houses and turns them into homes, and meals into expressions of love, and so on. And we should make art that shows that. And one thing I have to say about the film Sinners is it does show women far more realistically than a lot of films. They have power, they have presence, but it's feminine power, it's feminine presence. And we should be honest about men. To preserve the essential work of femininity, men are tasked with the infinitely complex and dramatic task of harnessing power to the service of love. They have to practice leadership without domination, strength without cruelty, integrity and fidelity amidst the temptation of having superior power. It's a very difficult thing to do, and it's how we judge other men when they betray their power, when they use it to dominate, and when they use it for cruelty. That is how we judge other men, and that's what stories are often about, whether we can find a man who is manly enough to win the heart of a woman womanly enough so they can begin the world again. At the end of Sinners, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but it doesn't really matter to your enjoyment of the film, at the end of Sinners, there is a vision of heaven as a woman nursing a baby. And I saw that and I thought, great, now they've actually got onto something. And the man, to reach her, to get to heaven, commits an act of vengeance and hatred and murder. And it's obviously against somebody that we think deserves it, but I thought that's the expression of a culture that has lost its way. That is the expression of a culture that has lost its way. And that's the reason the film doesn't work ultimately. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. That's what every angel in the Bible says. That's what God says. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak the name of God. Don't be afraid to celebrate the femininity we love and have lost because of feminism. Don't be afraid to face and express the complexity of creative manhood. There is so much talent out there, but without vision, the people perish, And we on the humane right, we, the traditionalists, the conservatives, the freedom lovers, we have the vision if we have the courage to express it. This is an amazing moment. God has led us to the very border of the promised land, and he is showing it to his people, and we are well able to enter in. The current handgun storage options are absolutely terrible. Either your weapon is locked up tighter than Fort Knox, so it's completely useless in an actual emergency, or it's sitting around like an accident waiting to happen. I've been using the StopBox Pro for some months now. It's 100% mechanical. There are no batteries, so they don't die on you at the worst possible moment. There's no keys to lose or fumble with. It's just reliable access when you need it. StopBox uses a patented 5-button locking system that responds only to your unique input. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's built for muscle memory, so you're not thinking, you're reacting. And when seconds matter, that makes all the difference. what really sold me was testing it out at home. The build quality is exceptional, it's durable, it's well built, and it should be since they make everything right here in the US of A. I can access it quickly in the dark, which gives me real peace of mind. Plus, for those of you who travel, it's TSA compliant, so you can actually fly with it properly secured in checked baggage, because it turns out TSA is not a fan of just throwing loose weapons in your bag. I've seen people go through TSA with weapons, and they really have to have a good box for it. For a limited time only, our listeners are getting a crazy deal. Our listeners are getting 10% off the entire order when you use code Andrew Klavan. And right now, StopBox is also running a deal on their most popular bundle, the 2-pack, which saves you over 30% and comes with free accessories and shipping. That's 10% off and a big bundle discount when you use code Andrew Klavan at StopBoxUSA.com. Discover a better way to balance security and readiness with StopBox. Before you head into Memorial Day weekend, don't miss this. It's our DailyWire Plus Memorial Day sale. Get 40% off an annual membership with code DW40. Watch all your favorite daily shows ad-free from the most trusted voices in conservative media: Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Dr. Jordan Peterson, and then it says, and more. It's because I am more than all the rest of them combined. Plus, unlock our full entertainment library, including an all-new episode of Ben After Dark tonight and the premiere of Parenting, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's powerful new series, dropping this Sunday exclusively on DailyWire Plus. Join now and save 40% on all annual memberships at DailyWirePlus.com with code DW40. Klavan Klapbacks.
Who was operating the auto pen?
It wasn't me. That's all I know. All right, Klavan Klapbacks, Klavan with a K, Klapbacks with a K at dailywire.com. Klavan Klapbacks at dailywire.com. Please write in, ask anything you want. We will try and read your questions. From Brian, Lord Andrew, King of the Klavanons, I would like to offer some humble pushback on your analysis of Patrick Deneen on your last show. Deneen can sound appealing because he uses sleight of hand by blaming society's problems on liberalism. Many conservatives assume he's referring to the left, but in actuality, he's referring to classical liberalism and the philosophical underpinnings of the American Revolution. He believes that Christianity successfully restrained us during the early republic, and so it needs to be achieved from the top down. It needs to be forced on us. It's a rejection of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Unless I'm mistaken, your political conviction affirms the founding and is categorically opposed to Deneen. From Brian. Yeah, Brian, I think there's some truth to this. I read his first book, and that's the way I felt about it. And then I saw a couple of speeches he gave, and he said, look, I'm not a policymaker, and I don't know how to get to this place. That's for you to decide. And he read that passage that I read on the air about from de Tocqueville about having religion, but being free by law, but having religion by culture. And that's what I want. I want to be free by law, but have religion by culture. And so I'm hoping that that's what he means. But you may be right about this. I'm not sure. I am not sure whether he's fooling us or not. So it's a fair pushback. But what I want is religion by culture, freedom by law. From Amanda, dear joyful, sexy, and majestic Klavan, hot Gandalf, if you will. I will. I just wanted to thank you for not answering. I wanted to thank you for not answering my mailbag question back in 2019. At the time, I had just had my 4th baby, and I wanted to know your thoughts on when you know your family is complete. You never got back to me, so now I have 8 children. Sometimes God answers prayers by not answering at all. Keep up the good fight, and never let women forget that the best and most fulfilling job a woman can have is as a wife and mother. Take it from me, a former child-free feminist. And she then includes a picture, which we won't put up because we don't want to invade her privacy, of this incredibly, incredibly beautiful family she has produced. Just this huge family. The only thing that mars it is that they're all wearing Philadelphia Eagles shirts, but the Chiefs deserved it, so I'm going to give that a pass. A beautiful, beautiful thing. So if by not answering I contributed in any way, if I passively contributed in any way to the production of that beautiful family, I'm happy, and I hope I can do it for the rest of you too. I have to leave you with that. If you are not a member, I can't believe you're still not a member. This is ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're now being plunged into Klavanless darkness. It could all be prevented. All you have to do is go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. If you do it quickly, the darkness will not close over you, and you can come with the rest of us to Member Block.